When September 11th happened, I was 11 years old.
Attacks took place. I was 18 years old.
When the attacks took place on September 11th, 2001, I was 20 years old.
When the attacks took place, I was in high school. I was 16 years old.
Nice.
I was 39 years old.
And on September 11th, 2001, I was 21.
On September 11th, 2001, I was 1 year old, going on 2.
When it happened, I was at home and I was in a room next to my dad who was watching the news when it happened. Yeah, the emotions that I was experiencing at the time, I don't think I fully understood exactly what happened, but seeing the images and processing what I could and seeing my dad's reaction kind of gave me a great feeling of concern. My most vivid memory of that day is obviously the images that were across the TV and seeing my dad cry for the first time.
When the first tower was hit, I remember that distinctly. I was working as a hotshot fighting wildfire with the Chena Hotshots, and we were on a fire in somewhere in south central Idaho. I don't remember, just outside of a small town. And we've been working a fire for a couple days, and we had stopped early in the morning at a small cafe to get breakfast for the crew, and there was a single TV that was on, mounted up high in the cafe, and we were all sitting there ordering breakfast, and I remember it came on when the first plane hit, and then everything that followed after that.
I was actually in Vancouver, getting ready to go to hockey practice. I was down in the hotel lobby getting breakfast, and I looked up on the screen and I saw one of the towers collapse, and I was like, huh, I wonder what's going on. And then ended up going to the rink, and one of my teammates was actually from New York, and his mom worked down right beside trade centers. So seeing him kind of all really sunk in of what was going on. Just seeing grown men, tough grown men cry, trying to figure out what's going on. My D partner bawling because he couldn't get a hold of his parents. So yeah, that's definitely something that stuck with me.
I was at school when we heard about it. I remember reporting to homeroom, and we literally just sat in homeroom the entire day, watching the news and talking with each other and trying to kind of make sense of it for a 16-year-old high school student, right? Just trying to make sense of what took place and working through just a myriad of emotions, and from fear to anger to frustration to just confusion of how this could take place in our country. And a lot of fear of just like what's next? Is this a single attack? Is this going to be a larger scale on American soil? Definitely a fearful thing. I think my most vivid memory was just watching that second plane hit and recognizing that it was catastrophic. It wasn't just a single isolated thing. That it was an intentional attack.
I was at home that morning. I was living in Lafayette at the time, and woke up and turned on the TV and saw the attacks going on. We were about a little bit more than a month away from my first son's birth. I just remember turning on the TV, and of course New York is in full blow-up mode. All the stations are on. One of the towers is smoking, and I remember wondering what what I was getting my offspring into. I couldn't believe what was happening, and it was very powerful for me that day. I was super happy to be home and not have to really speak to anyone. I didn't want to talk to anyone.
When the first plane hit, I was actually working out at Colorado State's rec center, and didn't really know what was going on, and went home and started watching TV, and then the second one hit. My most vivid memory would actually probably be trying to get a hold of my dad, because he worked for the Department of Defense, and everyone was calling everyone, so all of the phone lines were tied up, and didn't really know what was going on. So I was trying to get a hold of him just to make sure that he was okay.
My earliest memory of the attacks is probably when I was in elementary school. One of my childhood friends, they had a book. It was an historical account of the events, kind of through photography, that they had on their kind of kitchen table, entry table, and we would spend hours looking through the pictures in that book, and pictures of all sorts of things, of the firefighters, of just the streets, and the towers, the planes, all of that. And, I think that had a huge impact on my childhood, and on what I wanted to do when I grew up, and the respect I had for the fire service.
We were still on the fire. We went back out to the fire that we were working, and we were in a no active fire, so a mop-up phase, and kind of monitoring and patrolling. And due to the all air activity being shut down, we were supposed to have helicopters working on the fires and stuff like that. It was dead quiet. We had no support in the air. All the radios were just dead silent, and I remember sitting on the hill in the black and just having dead silence on the radios, nothing from air support, and no word on what else was going on. That really stuck in my mind, and we turned on a radio in one of the crew trucks just to listen for updates during the day. But as far as working our fire, everything, it felt like it just stopped. Yeah, it was surreal. Just across the country, and wildfire just stopped. There's just still fire burning. You know? Yeah. I was super young then, not really knowing what was actually going on, but we had distinct conversations because of the type of crew that I worked on, and that we were organized. FEMA was asking for crews, possibly to have fire crews go out and start digging through the rubble. So the biggest thoughts that I had was with the rest of the crew, we were truly thinking about, are we going to be called to help? And I remember thinking that I need to go.
I remember actually watching the Today Show, and them just reporting that they didn't really know what had happened. They had said a bomb had gone off. I believe a bomb had gone off in the building. And then as I kept watching TV, the second plane had hit, and essentially live on TV, and while I was watching TV, and just the uncertainty of everything, and just the chaos from watching it. I basically stayed home from class and watched to see what was happening the rest of the day, because even at that time, no one was really sure it was even a terrorist attack.
Growing up and now being a firefighter, it's had a tremendous impact. I think the bravery and courage that was displayed that day kind of lives on, and I think it's our duty now in the modern fire service to hold ourselves to honor them. So I think it's had a tremendous impact, and not only in my life, but on the fire service in general.
I know for one fact I would never want another 9/11, but it would take a 9/12 again, because I was up in Canada, so I wasn't down here, but seeing news feed and talking to people down here, the country pulled together, and everyone was one.
It's still raw. It was the culmination for me to become a firefighter. I was not a firefighter at that point in time. Less than a year later, I became a volunteer, and a couple years after that, actually became a paid firefighter. The emotions now are still, like I say, raw. And
20 years later, the emotions that go through me on this day are the biggest one being that if anyone wants to inflict harm, they're going to end up doing it. But every year I'm reminded that this country, we have men and women that will come together at the bat of an eye to help each other out. Now being a firefighter, it is probably one of the most pivotal days that I remind myself of why I do this job, and remind myself of the ultimate sacrifice that I'm willing to make.
20 years later, which it's crazy to think about. I think some of the biggest thoughts, looking back at it now, are I understood how significant it was for the country. Not as much for the fire service. I didn't realize it then, but I didn't realize how much it would actually impact my life. Working in the fire service, at that point in my career, I was focused on wildland, and I hadn't really thought about going into structure fire. And now 20 years later, it's been my whole career. I wish I would have been more connected. Wish I would have been able to do something. Since 2001, people have expressed a ton of thanks to firefighters, for doing the job that we do with that large loss of life that the fire service had that day. But I think about that, and I think I haven't. I guess I haven't given, definitely nothing what those 343 firefighters gave. I don't. Sometimes I feel that I could be doing more, or I could have had an opportunity to do more then. I don't know. I'm proud to be where I am today.
20 years later, the emotions that go through my head. It's funny, literally yesterday afternoon, sat down and was watching some 9/11 footage on TV, and my son was asking me questions and just trying to inform him that, this is what happened. And kids' questions are like, why? So innocent, but teaching him what happened, why it happened, and making sure that he never forgets, and understand that, being a firefighter myself, people ran into that building to save people, cops and EMS and civilians, and then also the men and women that went over to the Middle East to protect our freedom. So I've always been a big supporter of military, first responders, and so I've always tried to teach him the lessons and make sure that he shows respect, and he will never forget that day.
As a father of 4 children, I think looking at it and seeing that there have been times in that 20 years where I believed that this would never happen to us again, that we came together, we proved that we were a strength, a power, but again, that's ebbed and flowed over the last 20 years, believing that we're truly making an impact, making a difference, and being in a state of wondering whether we're doing the right thing, whether we're moving in the right path. I do believe that this is the best country in the world. I believe that this is the best country for my children to grow up in. I believe and I pray that something like this never happens again, so that my children never have to go through what we went through as a country.
20 years later, looking back, the same emotions and thoughts, just how that day and that event affected us as a country, and just affected us how we live and how we do things. We kind of put things in perspective as far as the amount of lives lost, what people are willing to do, and just to be aware of what's going on in other places. We aren't invincible, but we're willing to fight for what we have, and I think that day really brought that out in the United States. And
It's kind of unreal that it's that it's been 20 years, I guess, but also I mean I'm not much older myself, so it's absolutely it brings up emotions. It I think what does it bring up? I guess a lot of gratitude, obviously to the firefighters and the people that responded to that, and the sense of unity that I've heard that this country was able to feel from that. Also, I guess brings a good bit of anger that did happen, but I try to look at the bright side. So I think it brings a lot of respect and pride, honestly, to be part of the American Fire Service. I mean, obviously I was not directly involved in that, but I think to be in the American Fire Service, I'd like to think we walk in their footsteps and honor them. And I mean, it's a huge day now in the fire service. I mean, stair climbs, and I mean, we always do something on 9/11 to remember that day, to honor that day. So